Hello. All right, let me know if you can hear me. All right. Got my mic a little bit further away than normal, so I'll turn the gain up just a bit. Hope you're doing well. Today we are talking about phrasing for beginners. So, quick definition of phrasing. Vocal phrasing or musical phrasing is essentially how we're delivering a piece of music, how we're breaking it up. So, you could sing, oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? Or you could sing, oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? Had to grab a little catch breath in there, but phrasing is how we're breaking up those musical sentences, where we breathe, where we place emphasis, where our inflection is. So let me quickly go over our agenda for today. And I also want to draw your attention to the video description. In there, after the lesson, we'll have a couple of resources for you to continue your learning. An article on phrasing, a tutorial from our site, as well as 2 YouTube videos, one on onset and one on how to end a note or end a phrase without vibrato. This is really great for beginners who are still working on their vibrato. We've got some ideas on how to make a phrase sound complete without that little vibrato shimmer happening. Okay, so first, talking about what phrasing is and why it's important. Then we'll talk about how to determine phrases. We'll talk about dynamics and inflection. We'll talk about how to end phrases, including with vibrato, but we've got some other choices as well. And I'll give a quick intro to what we call back phrasing. This is a concept that will be familiar if you listen to a lot of jazz music. And I had planned to do exercises at the end, but I changed my mind. I think let's start with exercises today, and then we'll wrap up with Q&A. Okay, so a lot of beginners fall into the trap of singing note by note instead of phrase by phrase. So let me give an example. I could sing, just starting out with a really basic vocal exercise, walking up and down the scale, something like, ooh. If I'm singing note by note, it might sound like, ooh. Each note I'm kind of giving emphasis to, there's no sense of phrase, no sense of connection, even though my notes are technically connected. Ooh. I'm not stopping in between, but it's very much note by note, and it doesn't sound very musical or expressive at all. So even within a vocal warm-up, we can practice singing with a sense of the phrase rather than note by note. So what that might sound like, singing with a sense of the phrase, ooh, ooh. So the first time I kind of made that top note my goal note. The second time I made the end note my goal note. It's not a huge difference, but it will make a really big difference in our singing, especially when we apply this to our song work. So I encourage you to add a physical movement that's connecting you to this phrase as a whole. So rather than your physical movement being ooh, ooh, that might be a good one. A slow arc in front of you or drawing a circle. Some vocal coaches or choir directors will have their choirs make a little infinity symbol. Ooh. Just connecting to this idea that the phrase and the energy is continuing and we're not stopping at each note. Okay, hope that makes sense. Adding a physical movement, it's another way into the concept. And a lot of times your voice will just respond to that without you having to really do much extra work. So we're going to try this. Now, lower voices, meaning tenors, baritones, and basses. Tenors, this might be a little bit low for you to start out. So you can jump in maybe a cycle or two, but I'm going to start on G3. That's for sopranos and altos, and G2 for lower voices, tenors, baritones, basses. Though I recognize tenors, that'll be slightly too low for you. So let's sing something with a little bit more musicality. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we'll sing 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, 4, 2, 1. If those numbers confused you, just do your best to follow along. I'm going to sing it again. Just listen. And again, add a physical movement. So your energy continues to the end of the phrase rather than going and every note getting equal stress and just being very boring. Okay, here goes. Now we're ready to sing, starting on G3 or G2. Take a breath, and here we go. I want to add that movement as well. Might be a little bit too much brain power for me to do this movement and also play. So just keep playing, but add that movement. We're going to restart here at B flat 3 or B flat 2. Take a breath and let's walk back down, reset, make sure you're singing the correct pitches. So starting on E4 or E3, I'll sing it once. If you're just joining, and the whole point is that we're singing with a sense of the phrase. Our energy stays connected until the very end, instead of thinking of these as separate notes that are disconnected from one another. E4 or E3 starting out. Here you go. Take a nice low breath. Keep that movement going. D flat. C. So if you go and do that again at the very end, I was just calling out your starting note or the key that you're singing in. Okay, so let's jump in. We'll return to another exercise like that a little bit later. But I want to talk about why phrasing is important. I sort of alluded to this, but remember that phrasing is how we break up our musical sentences. It impacts where we breathe. It impacts the meaning that we're giving the song. It impacts our stylization. And it's important for beginning singers because it's a relatively easy way to up your musical game and to sound like a more professional without any vocal skills needing to be really refined. So a lot of vocal skills, agility, mix or middle voice, vowel tuning, all of this stuff really takes a while to learn, to get comfortable with, and to refine. Phrasing is something that from day one, you can start to sound like a more advanced singer just by having an awareness of your phrasing and not singing note by note or word by word. So I really, really like this for beginning singers. You can start to sound better already. So how to determine phrases? First, consider the text that you're singing. Second, consider the musical demands. So let's go through an example song. Because we've turned the corner into Christmas season and we have a lot of public domain Christmas songs that we can sing on here and not violate any copyright. We're going to be using some Christmas songs today. So I'm trying to find a good one with kind of longer phrases. How about, this is a good one. How about "Oh Holy Night"? So if you look up the lyrics to "Oh Holy Night" with me, just look up the lyrics. No music yet. We're just going to analyze and see how we'll break up these phrases. Okay, so we've got "Oh Holy Night, comma, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth." So if I were just to say that, "Oh holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth." That can inform our singing, "Oh holy night," little breath because we have a comma. "Oh holy night, the stars are brightly shining." Another little breath right after that because I have a new phrase. "Oh holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of the dear Savior's birth." I don't even know what key we're in. Okay, we're in the key of G flat. We'll pick a better key later. But it is the night of our dear Savior's birth. That's one connected phrase. I don't want to break it up with a breath. "Oh holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth." One connected phrase, my energy is going to the end. "Long lay the world in sin and error pining." So we do have a little comma here. We could observe, "Long lay the world in sin and error pining," or "Long lay the world in sin and error pining." I think my preference would be, let's knock out that comma. Let's make that one continuous phrase. "Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth." Till he appeared, you could have a little comma there. "Till he appeared and the soul felt its worth." But again, I think let's make this one connected phrase. till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. Going on, a thrill of hope, comma, a thrill of hope. The weary world rejoices. Again, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. So those commas, you can observe them. You don't necessarily need to. If you think that it serves the text better to go through a thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices. You got to take a breath somewhere. For yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. So try it out, but what we don't want is to break up this phrase in a way that doesn't make sense. A thrill of hope. No, you wouldn't say a thrill of hope, so don't sing it that way. For yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Again, you wouldn't say a new and glorious morn. So don't sing it that way because then you don't sound very natural. Okay, is this making sense? This will apply to any song that you sing. I know that you're probably familiar with a certain kind of way that that song is sung or a certain version. But don't let that necessarily dictate the way you sing it because you are your own singer. You can determine your own phrases, what makes sense both lyrically and musically. So the general rule is any place in the text that you have a comma, a period, a line break, a pause, or a new thought, that's a perfectly appropriate place to take a breath or to just pause. You don't always have to take a breath between phrases. If the thought continues, it is the night of our dear Savior's birth, we can't really break that up. What if, though? What if that was a super long phrase and you were having a hard time getting through it on one breath? Then we can consider the musical demands and try to choose the spot that makes the most sense. Because sometimes, yeah, we have to get through really long phrases and maybe you wouldn't take a breath there if you were speaking the text, but you have to sing it. Then you want to choose a spot that is okay, is passable, is not that noticeable. Okay, making sense? So, let me get back to you in case we've got any questions going on. You're free to ask questions, by the way. We have the last 15 minutes reserved for questions, but hey, if you have some as we're going along, please don't be shy. I'm every now and then looking at this comment section. All right, so got a lot of tabs open. Here we go. So consider text and musical demands, commas, periods, pauses, new thoughts. All of those are perfectly appropriate places to mark your phrases. And just ask yourself, if I was speaking this text, where might be a natural place to pause? And if it wouldn't be a natural place to pause, if you're just speaking or reciting this as a poem, then it's not a great spot to breathe. So once you've determined your phrases, there are a couple ways that we can mark those or notate those in our music. I am a big fan of printing out your lyrics, or if you have a device that you can edit. So if you are normally looking at an iPad or reading music off of your laptop, put it into some processing system that you can edit easily. And for a lot of people, that the easiest way is probably still going to be paper and pen, to quickly, underline, circle, highlight, stuff like that. But if you are paperless and if you have an easy, quick way to mark up lyrics, then use whatever's natural for you. So we can mark phrases one of a couple ways. In music, if you're looking at a piece of sheet music, phrases are typically marked out with these curved lines, markings. That's what they're called. So curved lines above a set of pitches. And sometimes, in addition, you'll also have a little apostrophe. Um, and that apostrophe for any musician, that means you lift or you can take a breath. So if you're a singer and you're reading a piece of vocal music, that little apostrophe means you breathe here. And that apostrophe, if you see it, it doesn't mean you can breathe here. It means breathe here, because the composer wants a breath there, or they're trying to unify breaths with a choir. Let's say you're in a choir and everybody has a breath at this certain spot. You need to breathe with the choir so that you are one unified, connected sound. Okay, but for a lot of us who are just reading lyrics and might be reading sheet music, you could, let's say, underline. You could have that curved line above your text. This is a phrase, and I'm gonna kind of chunk them together that way. You could draw in that little apostrophe, or the quick thing to do would be just to draw a check mark in between two words where you're breathing, or where you have the end of one phrase and the beginning of the next. So if you printed out your lyrics and you're also working on Oh Holy Night, maybe you've decided, oh holy night, breathe. The stars are brightly shining, breathe. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Your marking up of that text might look like, oh holy night, check mark in between night and the. Oh holy night, check, the stars are brightly shining. Maybe a check. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Maybe you draw one curved line over that phrase. Maybe you underline it, or maybe you don't need that. Maybe you know, okay, if I don't see a check mark, that means I don't breathe. So I'm going to make it through that phrase. Makes sense? The reason I'm a big fan of having your music marked up in this way is so that you can offload some of that brain power. It's a lot to focus on. Singing is, I don't want to say complex, but it is. There's a lot to think about. Your posture, your breath, your registration. And so if we can think about one less thing and just have it on our lyric sheet, that's great, because then you can focus more on your technique, more on the emotion and all of that. So I don't trust my brain to remember every little thing, and I'm a fan of marking up music, and most professional musicians are, because they just know there's a lot of other things to focus on. So mark up that music. That's not a beginner thing to do. That is a musician thing to do at any level. So you can start now as a beginner. Okay, so mark up that music. If your phrasing is pretty obvious, then maybe you don't need to make as many marks. But certainly, if there's a spot in your music that you're running past without breathing and you really need to breathe, please make a note, because if you're following along, then it'll just be that reminder you need. Hey, take a breath. Okay. Hope it makes sense. I'm going to answer one question here that Hugo. All right, Hugo is saying, when I practice the NG exercise, my passaggio is very notorious or very obvious. Okay, Hugo, we will get back to that at the end of the lesson. But a really, really quick tip for you would be doing some more top-down exercises rather than bottom-up. So that could encourage your vocal folds to thin out a little bit more at the beginning of the exercise, rather than having to thin gradually and adjust, going from heavy to a little bit lighter as you ascend. Hope that makes sense, but let's return to that thought a little bit later. Okay, once you've marked out your phrases, then now we can talk about dynamics and inflection. So inflection, we have that in spoken speech as well. If I say, I'm going to go back to Oh Holy Night. This is our kind of example song for now. If I say, a thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn, you would stop listening to me. If I sang, A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Now I'm singing the right notes, but I sound so boring, and I don't sound like I even know what I'm saying or like I believe it. So as a singer, you are also an actor. You've got to believe what you're singing, even if maybe you don't. You've got to act, pretend like you do for the sake of the text and the performance. So now that we have some example phrases marked out, we want to think about inflection and dynamics, meaning volume. What makes sense here for the text? A thrill of hope. The weary world rejoices. A thrill of hope. The weary world rejoices. So maybe I give a little bit of emphasis to weary, and then I brighten up and kind of push forward on rejoices. For yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. You can try this more than one way. So let's try this together. If I'm singing, a thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Let's try it one time with a gradual crescendo. We start quiet, and then we're going to gradually get a little bit fuller, a little bit louder, until we end on glorious morn. Try that with me. Let's see, what pitch did I start on? I started on C. A thrill. If you want to sing along with me, starting quietly, and we're growing, crescendoing, seeing how that impacts our phrasing. Here we go. A thrill of hope. The weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. I think that makes sense with the text. But that's not the only way we can interpret it. How about a thrill of hope? The weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. So grow on thrill of hope. Yay, we're getting excited. The weary world rejoices. Woohoo! And then we're going to bring it back, because we're saying for yonder, for over there, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. So we're going to get excited, and then we're going to get a little bit hushed. Let's give it a try. Again, see how it impacts your phrasing and your expression. A thrill, 1, 2, here we go. A thrill of hope. The weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. What do you think? It's not an issue of right or wrong. It's your choice as the artist. So you get to interpret this text and have your phrasing and your dynamics follow. Okay, inflection and word stress. This is another great way to sound more natural when you're singing, is to observe the same word stress or inflection that you would if you were speaking. For example, oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. We say brightly, shining. We don't say brightly or shining. So we can sound much more natural if we say, oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. Stars are brightly, instead of brightly, brightly. Pulling back as you would if you were just saying brightly. Stars are brightly shining, and shining rather than shining, both equally stressed. Does this make sense? I hope so. These aren't too terrible. If you say shining, it won't, no one's gonna gonna be super mad. But a thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices. Now, good composers are going to write with inflection and word stress in mind. So, rejoices. It kind of follows the natural word stress. Rejoices. We don't say rejoices or rejoices. Rejoices. The melody has this, rejoice, picks up for joy and then puts it back down for says. So as a singer, you don't have to do that much work. But it is something to be aware of. Not every composer is going to be writing with that much attention to the text. And so as a singer, you can interpret and make that text really, really natural sounding and really musical. Okay, so most phrases are either going to grow, meaning crescendo, or they're going to pull back a little bit or decrescendo. In non-musical terms, they'll get louder or they'll get softer. And a lot of phrases are going to do both. So, a thrill of hope. That's a good example of growing and then coming back. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices. There's some, the phrase breathes. It's not just the weary world rejoices, all equal dynamic and equal stress. The weary world rejoices. Wow, it sounds so much more natural, so much more musical, and it really doesn't take extra skill. It just takes this awareness. It will take practice, 100%, but not in the same way that other vocal skills take. You can start applying this today. Okay, so dynamics, inflection, word stress. Sometimes just to simplify, you can write out, is this phrase pushing forward or is it pulling back? Is it, rising or is it falling? Or is it doing both? You should know that. And if you don't, then, try out a couple different things and see what sounds best to you. Don't be afraid to do something silly. Like we tried, okay? I thought it sounded maybe slightly silly when we did a thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. And we crescendoed that whole way. Or when we pulled back, I can't remember. One of those felt a little bit unnatural to me. So keep that in mind. If it feels unnatural to you, then set it aside. But if it ends up sounding better and you sound like a more advanced, more emotionally connected singer, then do it. Okay, moving on. How to end phrases. So I've had this question from some beginning singers who feel like without vibrato or even with vibrato, that the ends of their phrases kind of just peter out or they're ending abruptly instead of smoothly. So one tip I want to give you is to think about releasing your phrases up rather than dumping them out or even putting them down. So even if your phrase has a thrill of hope, a thrill of hope, I can still think about releasing that phrase up, even if my dynamic is coming down. If I just think about stopping the sound, a thrill of hope, it just feels slightly unfinished. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. So all of those, I tried to just cut the sound off and not be very musical about the endings. If I think instead, I'm going to keep my energy going, even if my note stops, I know this doesn't make that much sense. It's more an intention than anything, but it really makes a difference. So let me give that example. I'm going to think about my energy continuing forward, the phrase continuing, even though my sound will momentarily stop. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. It's the difference of just stopping a phrase and continuing on to the next with this anticipation and this energy. So try that out. We can actually try that together. Am I still nice? Still starting on C. Don't know how many keys we're singing this song in. But a thrill of hope. Try this with me. Each little phrase, think about releasing that up and not just cutting off, stopping that phrase. Because we do have a couple phrases, a thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. But it is one thought. So we have kind of a bigger phrase and then these smaller phrases within. Here goes. Trying this concept of adding a physical movement and thinking about releasing that phrase up and continuing your energy going forward, even if your sound does stop momentarily. Give it a try. Here we go. A thrill, ready, sing. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. How'd it feel? I hope it feels a little bit different, although I totally expect that if you're not recording yourself and listening back, it might be a little bit too subtle to really hear. But that might be a good tip. Good evening. I'm going to check the comments really quick. Vancia, Manuel, Sheila. Sheila is saying, I must not be taking in enough breath. The phrase in Oh Holy Night where we sing the one phrase all at once with a breath, I seem to become tense and I really need to take a breath. So Sheila, hey, absolutely take a breath if you need it. I'm not saying that we all need to be like a hero. You do need to breathe. Singers need to breathe. So your intention and what you're working towards might be having one long connected phrase, but if you need to take that little catch breath, do so. Just find a spot that's not going to be too noticeable or throw off the intention of that phrase, if that makes sense. Okay. So I just want to quickly point to that other video I'll put in the description if it's not there yet. I have a couple different ways to end a phrase if you're still working on your vibrato. So a couple ways you can end a phrase are with a fall or releasing with breath or adding a little run at the end. So do return and see the video description for kind of a fun, shorter lesson on ending phrases without vibrato. Okay, so I think it would be super fun for us to run through a couple of Christmas songs together before we take some time for questions. I'll quickly give an intro to what we call back phrasing before we do that. So back phrasing in singing is when you are purposefully ahead of or behind the beat. So an example would be in the song Fly Me to the Moon, if we're singing on the beat, fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Okay, we're on top of the beat. Back phrasing could sound like being essentially a little bit late. Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. or being ahead of the beat. I know this is kind of difficult to imagine. I actually, if you guys are on TikTok, I just posted a little back phrasing example with this song, so you could check that out. Find it there. I have the backtrack going as well. So it's something to listen for, particularly with jazz singers. But the idea is that you don't necessarily need to be singing totally with the beat. Let's actually do it with "Oh Holy Night" because hey, we're already working on it. Um, it'll be a better example if you have chords that you're comparing against. So, first example, I'm going to be just on the beat, kind of singing it straight, and then I'll take a little bit more freedom and have a little bit more back phrasing. Oh, what key should we sing in? Started in the key of F sharp. I think I'm going to put this in the key of G because that's close enough. Oh. Okay. So first, no back phrasing. Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of the dear Savior's birth. Not a huge fan of these chords. Let's see if I can find better ones. I feel like there should be more chords. Okay, this looks a little bit better. No, that kind of looks the same. Oh well, I won't be picky. We're running low on time. Okay, this time I'm going to be a little bit more free with my phrasing. I won't be straight on the beat. 2, here I go. Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. It's kind of a weird song to do this with. Long lay the world in sin and error pining. So you can be behind the beat. You can also get ahead of the beat as well. It's kind of a weird example, but hey, listen for it in mostly jazz tunes and notice that the singer is sometimes on the beat and then occasionally it'll kind of sound like they're relaxing a little bit. They're relaxing behind the beat or they're arriving a little bit late and then they'll catch up. Sometimes they'll get ahead of the beat, so they'll be going kind of faster than the instrumental is. Okay, so very, very quick intro to that. But the main principle is you don't always have to be singing exactly as the sheet music tells you to sing. Okay, so let's choose another song or two. I'm looking at this list, and I'm trying to find ones with kind of longer phrases. In the bleak midwinter could be a good one. It came upon a midnight clear would be another one. Let's look that up. Midnight clear. And first we'll do just a quick kind of analysis and then we'll practice singing it. It came upon a midnight clear. I think that'll work. So we're in the key of C. Your starting pitch will be either G3 or G2. Quick phrasing analysis. Google the lyrics really quickly with me. It came upon a midnight clear, that glorious song of old. We could make that one long phrase, or we could say it came upon a midnight clear, comma, that glorious song of old. From angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. Again, we could make that one long phrase, from angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. Okay, Continuing our analysis, peace on the earth, goodwill to men, from heaven's all gracious King. Peace on the earth, goodwill to men. Most people just connect that, but you could peace on, let's see. Peace on the earth, goodwill to men, from heaven's all gracious King. Peace on the earth, goodwill to men. That's a good example of we don't really have time to breathe there. So probably make it one connected phrase. Goodwill to men, from heaven's all gracious King. Or you could say goodwill to men, comma, from heaven's all gracious King. Okay, let's give it a try. It 1, 2, 3, go. It came upon a midnight clear, that glorious song of old, from angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. Peace on the earth, goodwill to men, from heaven's all gracious King. The world in solemn stillness lay, to hear the angels sing. So that last phrase, the world in solemn stillness lay, to hear the angels sing. I think grabbing a little catch breath, but not making it a big deal. So the world in solemn stillness lay, to hear the angels sing. You don't want to make a really big breath there because it is one connected phrase. Is this making sense? I hope so. Okay, let's look up some more songs. Hopefully ones that you know. Let me know in the comments if you have a favorite carol. Quickly answering some questions. We are in question and answer time, so I'll be looking at the comments a little bit more. Manuel is saying, referring to back phrasing, is it like out of tempo? Sort of, yeah. So Manuel, the instrumental is continuing on. The tempo of the instruments is not changing, but the vocalist is kind of going a little bit slower or speeding up a little bit. So yeah, it's like you're kind of forgetting about the, I would say not so much out of tempo so much as you're just changing that rhythm a little bit, and you're kind of airing on either the front side of the beat or the back side of the beat. You're still very aware of the tempo because you need to know where in relation to the beat you are, if that makes sense. And Hugo is asking, there's people who don't like to hear their own voice singing. How do we get over this and be comfortable with it? Is it confidence? Hugo, I have a lot of thoughts on that. So maybe we'll get back to some phrasing practice, but I want to talk with you about that really quickly. I've run across maybe 5 students in my years of teaching. And so I started teaching privately in 2015, I want to say. So in all that time, and I've been teaching consistently, tons of singers, a lot of beginners, ages like 5 to 80. And I've come across maybe 5 students who are like totally cool with their voice and they like it and they sing a song, and I'll ask them, because this is my practice. I don't right away tell them, give them my notes. I like to ask, what did you think? What did you like or dislike? And maybe only 5 people have been like, yeah, it was good. Like, yeah, no problems. I think it was great. Almost everybody has things that they dislike about their voice, myself included. most professional singers included. And honestly, it's part of that kind of dissatisfaction that keeps you learning and growing and practicing. Um, if you're like totally in love with your own voice, then you're probably not going to work on it too hard. You're also probably not going to be open to other people's, you know, advice or counsel on your voice. Um, but I just tell you that most people naturally don't like the sound of their voices, their speaking voice or their singing voice. And a big reason for that is because all our lives, we are used to hearing our voice from inside our own body. So we're hearing our voice and we're getting these like reverberations, and sound is like the sound that we get is not only out in the air, but it's also from our body and being conducted a little bit more bone and traveling through flesh. And so it sounds deeper and richer. It actually is. So that's why when you hear your voice recorded, you're like, whoa, I sound like a little kid, or I sound nasal, or I sound so annoying. How do I even have friends? Okay, we've all had those thoughts. um, and that's because when other people are listening to your voice or when it's being recorded, that sound wave is just traveling through air. And that is a more realistic kind of, it's more realistic because it's what other people are hearing. And I mean, typically we're singing for other people, right? We're not just singing for ourselves. So how to come to terms with that, I think, is experience, but experience listening to yourself. So not just experience singing, but also experience recording yourself, listening back, and sitting with that, you know, kind of uncomfortable feeling, and forcing yourself to listen for things that you do like and that you are doing well. And that's why I'm really glad you're here today, because again, broken record, but phrasing is something that if you implement it, you can sound better without having to put in, you know, so much practice time. But force yourself to point out the things that you did well, and then also the things that you still want to keep working on and that you want to change for next time. Also, develop a sense of separation between you, like Hugo, you as a person, and Hugo who just sang and recorded something. Listen to yourself not as that performer, but listen to yourself as like Hugo, objective, kind of like put your teacher hat on, put your vocal coach hat on, and listen and be objective about it, because that really is what needs to happen. You have to have some objectivity and some distance between yourself, like the vocal technician, and the singer. If you just plug your ears and put your head in the sand, then you won't be thinking objectively or clearly, and you won't be able to implement things that will actually help you sound better. I hope that makes sense. That's me. Because if you're listening to yourself and it's just this hugely self-conscious experience, then it's really difficult to improve from that point. So force yourself to record, listen for things you're doing well too, and also, I think this is huge. Choose songs that are a natural fit for you. So if you're really struggling, the range is really wide, and maybe even like the key overall, like let's say you have a higher voice and you're trying to sing these super low songs, you're not going to get your best tone. So try to find singers with a similar range to yours and sing songs of theirs. Not every song you sing has to be this crazy feat. And I think a lot of times, like wow, Hugo, you've really got me started here. I think we overemphasize, you know, singing high and really loud, sustained high notes. You know, every singing competition show kind of seems to overemphasize that. But there are tons of musicians who don't rely on that as a device, and who sound wonderful and beautiful. So I think choose singers whose strengths are similar to your own. Choose songs with ranges that are more limited. So if you're a beginner, I wouldn't be singing songs like, you know, songs with a super, super wide range. So going really low in your range to really high. That alone, if you limit the range of the songs you're singing, also go to singing carrots, so you can find your vocal range and then also kind of input, say, I want easy songs. And when you say that, it'll explain it on the site, but it'll choose songs for you that are not as wide as your range. So if your lowest note is this and your highest note is that, then the songs that they'll pick for you are going to be somewhere in here. It won't be, forcing you to sing your lowest and highest note within that song. And so Manuel is adding, same. I had the same too. I got comfortable, and Manuel's saying he hated his voice, but he got comfortable with it. And patience too. I'm not sure what that word is supposed to be. You can retype it if you want. So Hugo, is this making sense to you? I think knowing that everybody suffers from that hate the sound of my own voice feeling, you are so not alone. And forcing yourself to record, listen back. You want to listen for the good things to keep a positive attitude and positive mindset, but also listen for the things you want to change so that you can get in there and work on it. Okay. I do have an article on this that I just wrote that kind of has this written out. So I'll find that and I'll put it in the comments of this video, not the live chat, but the regular comments. So let me just I'm going to make a note to do that. So any questions on phrasing, questions, just other questions, let me know. I'm making a little note to myself right now. So, oops. Confidence, essentially. A moment of silence. I think it takes a while to find your style. And I think singing along with different singers, trying out different genres, I think that's all really, really important. I would say I'll speak from my own personal experience. I grew up doing musical theater, and it wasn't until college, really, that I took a deep dive into jazz and took jazz voice lessons. And that just was revolutionary for me. I don't sing jazz exclusively, but it did so much for my confidence. I can't even tell you how important that was, because I went into college and just as a rule, you have to start out taking classical voice lessons. And at that time, I was not classically trained. I'd been taking voice lessons, but it was almost all with a musical theater focus. And it's just a different style. Tonally, you're using your voice differently. So I was not a natural fit with classical voice. And, I don't know how many people would be, but that's beside the point. I wasn't good at it. And I was coming from being good at musical theater singing and my whole life being like, that's in my wheelhouse. So then to get to college and be confronted with this style of singing that was not an easy fit. I didn't like the sound that I was making. I didn't know how to make it better. And I didn't sound like my teacher. I didn't sound like her other students who, apparently were doing great or maybe had been taking classical lessons all their lives. I don't know. But I started taking jazz, and it was just, it gave me so much confidence because it was an easy fit right away. I was like, I can do this. Is this an option? Like, if I can do this, then I can stay, I can stay in music. But if my only option is classical voice, can't do it. Can't cut it. So if you're putting those parameters on yourself as well, unfortunately, I don't want to crush any dreams, but um, if you have a really narrow view of what you want your voice to be, that can sometimes be a recipe for frustration. If you're like, this is my favorite singer, I want to sound like them. If I don't sound like them, then I fail. That is too narrow of a box, my friend. Um, you've got to be open to what your voice naturally does, and blame your genetics, blame your upbringing, but we can't all do it all. So for example, if I only listened to Beyonce and was like, well, if I can't sing Beyonce as good as Beyonce, then I have no business being a singer, I wouldn't be a singer. Or I would just, maybe have thrown myself into that. But no, we can't all do it all, and I think being open to what your voice naturally does well is so important for your emotional and mental health. Remember that singing is different than other instruments. I know instrumentalists might get mad at me, but it is different when your instrument is a part of you. It's so closely linked to your personality and just you as a person. Your voice is you. So it's very, very difficult when your voice isn't doing what you want it to do or sounding how you want it to sound. So I think it's a balance of growing, continuing to learn about your voice and learn to control it. But also be open to what your voice likes and what's easy for you. Okay? I hope that makes sense. One more question. Emily's asking, can my resonance and larynx position have any specific effect on vocal phrasing? So Emily, I think your resonance and your larynx position is going to have an impact on your tone. I wouldn't necessarily say that there is a direct link to your phrasing, because you can alter your tone and kind of sing with the same phrasing, same sense of phrase, breathe at the same places, same dynamic, push and pull, all of that. Yeah, not to say that they're totally unrelated. I think everything in singing is related, is connected. But I would say not directly. Yeah. All right. Thank you guys for joining me on a different day. This was, or still is, Thanksgiving weekend here in the States. And hey, it's Manuel's birthday next week. Awesome. I appreciate you guys joining and chiming in live. Hugo, I will find that article and post a link for you in the video comments, and I'll make sure that the description is also edited with those resources for you if you want to keep on working on your phrasing. Okay, thank you guys. I will see you next time. Bye.